mated to the Lycan King. Chapter 8. Raven lingered in the southern castle courtyard, running her fingers over the smooth stone railing while recalling the glow of lanterns and music from Ella's Luna ceremony. The celebration had concluded the night before, a triumphant testament to the unity that she, Lucian, Kieran, and Ella had fought so hard to achieve. Dawn was just breaking, bathing the sky in gentle shades of pink and orange. She felt Lucian's presence at her side before she heard him speak, an unspoken warmth stretching between them. His arm slipped around her waist, and she leaned into him, quietly savoring how comfortable and safe his nearness made her feel. He asked her softly if she had slept well. She offered him a reassuring nod, though truthfully, her rest had been filled with thoughts and vivid dreams. She turned her gaze to him, noticing the gentle concern in his eyes as they flickered down to her belly. She knew he worried, especially now that her pregnancy was showing more each day. It made him simultaneously protective and endearingly anxious, a constant struggle between wanting to give her the freedom she had always cherished and ensuring she did not strain herself unnecessarily. Raven felt a surge of affection at his hovering care, a fierce wave of gratitude that made her want to draw him even closer. Kieran emerged from the castle soon after, hair still slightly disheveled from a night of short rest. Ella followed closely, her cheeks glowing with the remnants of celebration. The new Luna of the Southern Pax carried an air of confidence now that had not been there before. She and Kieran exchanged smiles reminiscent of a couple sharing private secrets. Raven could not help but feel a similar warmth when her eyes swept to Lucian again, reflecting on how everything had changed for the better since they had first crossed paths. Ella greeted Raven with the soft, open expression that only deep friendship can foster. She asked if Raven was ready to travel, her voice laced with concern and genuine affection. Raven responded that she was, though a part of her felt reluctant to leave after having seen the Southern Territory bloom so swiftly under Kieran's leadership. The memory of the Luna ceremony still floated in her mind, the joyous crowd, the tender vows, and the hush that had fallen when Ella was declared Luna. Raven knew that the Southern Pax were in good hands, but it tugged at her heart to part ways so soon. Ella insisted she had more to discuss with Kieran before they said their final goodbyes, so Lucian took the chance to nudge Raven gently toward the gardens that lay beyond the courtyard. The two walked side by side, the morning sunlight illuminating the trimmed hedges and clusters of flowers bursting with color. It was clear that efforts had been made to restore this castle in ways that honored both tradition and new beginnings. Perhaps, Raven mused, it was reflective of the renewal the entire southern region was experiencing. As they crossed under a stone arch draped in pale blue blossoms, Lucian paused and turned to her. There was a mischievous sparkle in his golden eyes, and Raven felt her heart skip. He took both her hands in his, guiding her deeper into a secluded part of the garden. The space opened into a small clearing where a circle of lanterns hung, unlit now in the early light. A few candles were set on a low table, next to a bowl of fresh berries and a carafe of sweet juice. Soft cushions lay arranged, inviting them to sit. She recognized that this must have been one of Lucian's carefully planned ideas, a romantic moment contrived for them both, away from watchful eyes. Her lips curved in a gentle smile, grateful that even amid responsibilities he found time for gestures like these. He guided her to one of the cushions and settled beside her, never letting go of her hand. It was tranquil, with only the distant hum of castle workers and morning birdsong punctuating the silence. She felt her wolf stirring, sensing the tenderness in this private moment. Lucian gazed at her, and his features were still laced with cautious concern. She touched a reassuring hand to his cheek, murmuring that she was fine. He returned her gesture with a gentle kiss against her knuckles. He confessed softly that he worried she was overexerting herself, traveling and overseeing so many things. He teased in a half-joking tone that he might just carry her everywhere they went if it meant she would not tire as easily. Raven laughed, placing her free hand lightly on her belly, feeling the soft swell that had become a comforting and wondrous reality. She teased him back, saying that she might let him if her feet ever truly began protesting. Their dialogue flowed from teasing into heartfelt intimacy. Lucian commented on how extraordinary she had become, how much strength and resilience she had shown since the day he first found her living like a rogue, wary and untrusting of others. His voice glowed with admiration. Raven felt a pang of emotion in her chest, recalling how terrifying and exhilarating it had been to accept him as her mate. She reminded him, with a soft squeeze of his hand, that he too had grown and changed, becoming not just a fierce alpha king but also an empathetic and loving partner who balanced power with vulnerability. He leaned forward, capturing her lips in a lingering kiss. The morning light danced over them, and she breathed in his familiar scent, letting the warmth of his body chase away any lingering worries. His arms settled around her as they talked in hushed, affectionate voices. She told him how grateful she was for his constant support, for his unwavering presence through all the battles and betrayals. He responded that he would cross every battlefield again if it meant keeping her safe, especially now with the life they had created thriving within her. There was a gentle sensuality in the air as they exchanged whispered promises, heartfelt confessions, and tender caresses. He brushed his fingertips softly over her arm, trailing the curve of her shoulder, and she ran her hand through his dark hair, marveling at how close they had become. All the while, the garden's flowers swayed in a faint breeze, their sweet fragrance forming a peaceful cocoon. It was a precious interlude that would sustain them through future trials. Eventually they heard footsteps approaching and they broke apart gently, sharing one last quick kiss before turning to find that Ella stood at the archway, eyes sparkling with barely contained excitement. She apologized for interrupting, but it was obvious from the faint smile tugging at her lips that she was glad to see them so at ease. Lucian rose, helping Raven to stand as well. They returned to the courtyard where Kieran, Darius, and Thalos waited. Kieran approached, pulling Raven into a tight embrace. She returned it wholeheartedly, congratulating him once again on how swiftly he was integrating changes into the Southern Pack. He grinned, glancing back at Ella with a warm expression that spoke volumes. It was clear that the bond they shared had only strengthened after the Luna ceremony, that they found solace and purpose in each other. Raven felt a pang of joy and nostalgia, remembering the early days when Ella fought tooth and nail against fate, only to realize that sometimes fate led exactly where one needed to be. Ella and Raven spent a moment in hushed conversation, reflecting on everything that had transpired. Ella admitted that she once believed she could never trust anyone, let alone a mate, but meeting Kieran had shattered her defenses in the best possible way. She confessed how deeply she cared for him and how ready she was to forge a future at his side, building on the unity they had found in the South. Raven offered her heartfelt congratulations, wishing her dear friend the same happiness she herself had discovered with Lucian. With heavy yet hopeful hearts, Raven and Lucian made their farewells. Darius clasped Kieran's arm, offering a half-serious warning to call for backup if anything amiss occurred. Thalos nodded in agreement, though he tempered it with encouragement, reminding Kieran that the Southern Packs needed strong leadership, but also honest compassion, traits Kieran possessed in abundance. In a show of brotherly affection, Lucian hugged Kieran, instructing him to keep them updated on all Southern affairs. Finally, Raven embraced Ella with warmth, urging her to write often and promising to visit once circumstances allowed. When at last they departed, the southern castle gates opened to let their small caravan through. Horse-drawn carriages carried supplies and a few personal belongings for the travelers, while Raven, Lucian, Darius, and Thalos alternated between riding and walking, hoping to keep the journey manageable for Raven's condition. She felt momentary stabs of sadness at leaving behind the place where she had seen so much renewal, but she reminded herself that she was returning to her own home, where her responsibilities and people awaited. Unbeknownst to them, a cloaked figure watched from a discreet vantage, carefully hidden behind a cluster of stalls near the castle walls. This individual had been present during the Luna ceremony, observing from a distance with a silent and intense focus. Now, with the travelers on the move, the figure melted into the background, following at a cautious pace. Raven had felt the faint prick of her wolfish instincts the night of the ceremony, but the presence had vanished so quickly she had dismissed it as lingering tension. Yet as the group ventured toward the main kingdom, the mysterious watcher ensured they never strayed far from sight. The journey back began in high spirits, with Lucian insisting that Raven rest frequently. He teased her that he would carry her if she so much as winced, and she teased him back that she would bite his hand if he treated her like an invalid. Darius and Thalos accompanied them, riding ahead at times to scout and falling back to share conversation and updates. There was a sense of relief in the air, a collective exhalation now that the southern region had found stability under Kieran and Ella's guidance. Whenever they stopped, Lucian turned his full attention to Raven, offering her water, helping her settle onto a makeshift seat if the ground was too hard, and ensuring she was never chilled by the breeze. At one resting point, he removed his cloak and draped it around her shoulders, even though she insisted she was not cold. She allowed it anyway, touched by the quiet devotion in his eyes. Thalos looked on with wry amusement, his own stoic nature softening slightly whenever he watched Lucian's efforts. He later confided to Darius that he admired how wholeheartedly Lucian had embraced his role not just as king, but as a soon-to-be father determined to guard his mate. As the caravan traveled, Raven reflected on how fully her life had changed. She thought back to when she was a loner, lost in self-doubt, and marveled at the sense of belonging she felt now. Lucian's devotion, Kieran's unwavering sibling bond, and the acceptance of the entire pack had reshaped her world. Now she carried not just one future heir, but a precious new life she had yet to truly know. She found her heart lifting each time she thought of the child who would inherit two powerful lineages. Occasionally, she placed a hand on her belly and smiled to herself, feeling confident she was exactly where she was meant to be. Along the route, Darius scouted the roads ahead, his sharp eyes looking for potential threats. Thalos continued to keep watch on their flanks, occasionally doubling back to ensure no stragglers followed them. Yet, unknown to them, the cloaked figure remained several paces behind, expertly blending with any traveling merchants or caravans that occasionally crossed their path. The figure made no move to attack, never drawing a blade or uttering a challenge, content only to observe and wait. By the time they reached the borders of the main kingdom, Raven felt both excitement and relief. She yearned to see the familiar castle gates, to reconnect with the pack members who had stood by her. The final stretch of the journey brought them through rolling hills and thick forests. The crisp air carried a sense of homecoming. Lucian's tension seemed to ease somewhat, though he never stopped inquiring about her comfort. They arrived at dusk, greeted by the sight of the kingdom's castle lit by torches and lanterns. A small crowd had gathered in anticipation of the queen's return. As Raven stepped from the carriage, she was met by warm cheers and respectful bows. The pack members rushed forward, exclaiming over how radiant she looked and offering gentle congratulations on her pregnancy. She felt her cheeks flush at the attention. Lucian stayed close, guiding her carefully through the well-wishers to ensure she was not overwhelmed. In the courtyard, a row of children bearing flowers approached hesitantly. She recognized many of them from the orphanage she had helped improve, and a wave of affection coursed through her. She knelt to accept their offerings, though she had to move slowly due to the weight of her belly. One child, a bright-eyed girl with coppery hair, presented Raven with a small pouch of herbs, stammering that they were meant to soothe any aches. Raven's heart melted at the gesture, and she thanked the child, promising to use them well. Soon, attendants ushered Raven and Lucian into the castle, offering them refreshment and a chance to rest. But a commotion in the hallway diverted their attention, as the royal healer insisted on checking on Raven immediately to gauge her health after the long journey. Lucian, of course, was fully in favor of this plan, though Raven rolled her eyes good-naturedly at his nods of agreement. She acquiesced, knowing that rest and routine care were part of her duties now. They were guided to an airy, well-lit chamber where the healer performed a thorough examination. Raven answered questions about how she was feeling, describing her energy levels, appetite, and any unusual sensations she had experienced. The healer listened attentively, then moved on to more specific checks. Lucian lingered at Raven's side, one hand never leaving hers, his anxiety evident in the tightness around his eyes. When the healer paused, brows furrowing in a mix of curiosity and joy, Raven's heart raced. The healer offered them a soft, knowing smile and explained that upon closer evaluation, it seemed they were not awaiting a single child. Instead, the gentle evidence pointed to the presence of twins. The words hung in the air as Raven and Lucian exchanged stunned looks. A powerful surge of emotion nearly stole her breath. Lucian was the first to find his voice, blurting out a breathless question to be certain he had heard correctly. The healer confirmed the joyful discovery, adding that it was not uncommon for powerful Lycans to conceive multiples, though twins remained relatively rare. The enormity of it thundered through Raven's mind. 2 tiny lives growing inside her, 2 daughters who would carry both her rogue lineage and Lucian's royal blood. She felt tears sting her eyes as Lucian pulled her into his arms, murmuring words of amazement and devotion against her hair. Emotion crackled between them as they emerged from the healer's chambers. Darius and Thalos, who had been waiting nearby, picked up on the shift in their expressions. When Lucian announced the twins, Darius let out a whoop, clapping Lucian on the back, while Thalos allowed a genuine smile of approval to break through his normally reserved demeanor. Raven found herself swarmed by well-wishers once more, though the caretaker and Lucian swiftly ushered her away from too much excitement. Later that evening, Lucian guided Raven along a corridor leading to a room she had not seen in a while. He stopped her just outside the door, instructing her to close her eyes before he slowly pushed it open. She acquiesced, trusting him implicitly. When he told her to look again, she found herself standing in a beautifully decorated nursery. Soft drapes of gentle pastel colors framed tall windows. Plush rugs covered the floor, embroidered with motifs of wolves running under a moonlit sky. A rocking chair stood in one corner, and shelves lined the walls, filled with carefully chosen toys and storybooks that echoed their journeys and triumphs. She moved toward the twin cribs placed side by side, heart fluttering wildly. Each was crafted from polished wood with intricate carvings reminiscent of the castle's architecture. At the foot of each crib hung a small tapestry depicting scenes from both Raven's rogue beginnings and Lucian's regal heritage, symbolizing how these children would be part of 2 worlds woven into one. She reached out to run her fingers over the carved details, feeling tears threaten to well up again. Lucian stepped behind her, arms encircling her waist. He rested his chin gently on her shoulder, his breath warm against her neck. He explained that he had started preparing this nursery some time ago, though the discovery of twins now made it doubly important. She turned in his arms, seeing the tenderness in his gaze, and a deeper intimacy stirred in her chest. She pressed close, kissing him softly, voicing her gratitude in quiet murmurs. The moment brimmed with affection and promise, a promise of a future that included not just them, but the 2 precious lives they would soon welcome into their family. The glow of that evening carried into the following days. Raven felt a surreal sense of joy as she wandered through the castle, greeting familiar faces, receiving congratulatory remarks, and catching glimpses of the nursery's open door whenever she passed by. But beneath that happiness, an undercurrent of awareness lingered. She found her thoughts drifting to the night of Ella's Luna ceremony, to the fleeting sense of being watched. Now that she was back in her own kingdom, that feeling might have faded, but her instincts told her it was not gone entirely. Every so often she thought she caught movement out of the corner of her eye, a flicker of a dark cloak in a corridor or a courtyard corner. When she turned to look, she found nothing. She told herself it might just be the residue of worry clinging to her mind. Still, Raven could not entirely shake it. She knew that the peace they had earned came with a cost, and that cost sometimes was constant vigilance. She spoke with Darius about random glimpses of strangers in the castle, or faint signs that someone moved through the halls unseen. He listened carefully, promising to conduct a quiet investigation. Thalos, too, expressed his intention to keep watch, though he acknowledged that the castle often harbored visitors from allied pacts. Their presence was usually recorded and openly declared, so any cloaked newcomer lurking about would indeed be suspicious. Raven was grateful for their vigilance and tried not to let worry overshadow her newfound joy. In the quieter hours of the day, Raven connected with Thalos on a more personal level. They discussed how far they had come, from the days when he served as a stoic observer, to now, where he played a pivotal part in safeguarding the kingdom. Thalos revealed that he found solace in forging genuine connections with the people he protected, perhaps even hoping to open his heart to possibilities he once dismissed. Raven teased him gently, suggesting he might surprise them all by finding a mate of his own someday. He responded with a small half-smile, not denying the possibility. She found similar moments of sincerity with Darius, who seemed to carry an unspoken weight in his stance at times. When pressed, he admitted he had begun to wonder if there was more to life than endless patrols and battles. She listened with compassion, encouraging him to explore the quiet pockets of life between conflicts. She reminded him that he was not alone, that he had friends who valued him. He seemed grateful, though he joked that if he ever decided to become a poet or an artist, she should not be too surprised. Beyond these reflective conversations, Raven occasionally felt a subtle pull in her chest, a stirring of power that signaled her twin bond with Kieran. She closed her eyes at night, sensing him from across the distance. Sometimes she pictured him standing on a balcony of the southern castle, arm around Ella, gazing out at the moonlit horizon. There was contentment there, a sense of triumph and belonging, but she also picked up flickers of caution. Perhaps Kieran, too, had not entirely let down his guard. Weeks passed in a steady rhythm of routine and anticipation, and Raven's belly rounded further, making the presence of twins unmistakable. She and Lucian grew even closer in these days, frequently discussing names, dreams, and how they would manage the responsibilities of ruling while raising two daughters. The notion of Lucian as a father sent a surge of warmth through Raven's heart. She pictured him teaching their children about loyalty, about the strength that comes from unity, while she would ensure they never forgot the lessons she had learned in her days as a rogue. One late afternoon, she found Lucian seated in the nearly complete nursery, eyes distant as he gently drummed his fingers on one of the crib railings. She entered quietly, settling beside him, letting silence stretch for a breath or two. When she asked what was on his mind, he admitted softly that he was torn between elation and worry, uncertain if he could truly protect not just Raven but two babies who would need his guidance in a world that had shown its cruelty many times. She cupped his face, reassuring him that together they had withstood betrayals, battles, and doubts. Together, they would stand against anything that threatened their growing family. They held each other for a while, the late sunlight streaming through the windows, painting the walls in soft golden hues. Raven felt Lucian relax, shoulders loosening as he breathed out. She promised him that he would be a wonderful father, that their daughters would know the kind of love and security she once thought could never be hers. He responded by pressing a lingering kiss to her forehead, whispered confessions of how vital she was to him, how she had changed everything. It was the sort of moment that made her heart clench with gratitude, reminding her that even as threats lurked, their bond gave her courage. But life in the kingdom moved on. Preparations for the twins' arrival increased. The pack members pitched in, some weaving blankets, others carving small trinkets to hang near the cribs. The entire castle buzzed with anticipation, as though Raven's pregnancy symbolized hope that even the darkest times could yield blessings. She walked the halls each day, receiving smiles and respectful nods from guards, giggles from young children who marveled at the idea of two princesses. The atmosphere glowed with optimism. Yet just as a faint breeze can hint at a coming storm, a quiet sense of foreboding threaded through the castle's corridors. Unrecognized footprints sometimes appeared in dusty corners where no official visitor should have trod. A fleeting silhouette was spotted by a guard who could not offer any clear description aside from a dark cloak. The guard reported that the figure disappeared into the labyrinth of passages before being confronted. Darius and Thalos intensified their discreet patrols, ensuring Raven remained unaware of the specifics so as not to heighten her stress. Raven, however, felt the hair on her neck prickle when she wandered alone in a corridor late one evening, searching for Lucian. The torches burned low, casting elongated shadows that flickered across the stone floors. She thought she caught a glimpse of movement at the far end of the corridor, a shape too swift and silent to be a servant. She stared, heart pounding, but the shape faded beyond her line of sight. For a moment, she placed a protective hand over her belly, the primal instinct of a mother's worry sparking inside her. Then Lucian appeared, calling her name gently, and the sensation receded into fleeting memory. As the chapter of her daily life wound to its present moment, she found herself in their shared chambers with Lucian. They spoke quietly about plans for the next seasonal festival, about how they might manage travel once the twins arrived, and whether the castle needed more space for guests. He teased that they might need double the time to baby-proof every corner, now that they would have two curious minds to wrangle. She laughed, resting her head on his shoulder, letting his steady heartbeat lull her into comfort. In that intimate hush, she gently broached the topic of the glimpses she had caught, the unsettling feeling that someone roamed the castle, unseen. Lucian grew solemn, acknowledging that Darius and Thalos had discovered minor signs of intrusion, but nothing concrete. They agreed that caution was necessary, that they would remain vigilant. For a time, they sat together in thoughtful silence, arms around each other, determined not to let fear quench the light of hope that their growing family symbolized. Soon, nightfall fully settled over the kingdom. Raven stood by the balcony, looking down at the courtyard bathed in moonlight. Lucian wrapped his arms around her from behind, murmuring how radiant she looked, how he cherished every step of this journey they were on. She sank back against him, feeling his warmth, grateful for the momentary lull in responsibilities. Her thoughts strayed to Kieran, to the gentle signal of their twin bond that occasionally flickered within her. She sensed contentment there, and a faint echo of caution. She wondered if he sensed her own quiet concern. When she finally turned in his arms, she gazed into Lucian's eyes, reflecting on the battles they had won, the scars they bore, and the triumph of having found not just love, but a future brimming with promise. Their kiss was a gentle seal on that reflection. Then, hand in hand, they retreated inside for the night, hoping for peaceful rest. But somewhere beyond the palace walls, or perhaps within corridors only half lit by moonlight, a figure lurked in the shadows, a cloak wrapped tight against prying eyes. This stranger had managed to slip inside the kingdom unnoticed, as though led by a purpose known only to them. Observing silently, they studied guards' routines, memorized the castle's layout, and listened for rumors in hushed corners. Their gaze flicked occasionally toward the high windows of the royal chambers, glimpsing silhouettes that might belong to the queen and her mate. No outward threat was made, no confrontation sought. Yet the intent remained as tangible as a drawn blade hidden under cloth, a slowly building tension that hinted at conflicts or revelations still waiting to unfold. Night deepened, stars glimmered in endless blackness, and the world seemed at rest. But the seeds of a new challenge had been planted, quietly, invisibly, waiting for the moment to emerge and test the kingdom's strength once more. For now, Raven and Lucian slept entwined, comforted by each other's presence and the knowledge that they carried twin daughters who would one day walk these halls. Whatever came next, they would face it together, bound by love, united in purpose, and fortified by the unwavering loyalty of those who stood beside them in the light and the darkness alike.